So today I'll be talking or sharing my experience. I don't consider myself a Flutter expert or a programming expert, but I'll be sharing my experience, how I done it from the time I started using Flutter and how to properly architect your app. Is it possible I share my screen?
Yeah, you can share it.
Sorry for being late. I think the time zone, I'm in Nigeria, so the time zone difference, I miscalculated. I thought it was 10 o'clock in the evening here. I miscalculated it. Yeah.
Sorry about
I
that. It happens a
just
lot.
used Google to check the time difference, and then it gave me 10 p.m. Converting Eastern African time to West African time. So
sorry about
that was the issue. Okay. Most of my slides I can't see, but I'll just explain. Architecture. So basically today will be looking at what is app architecture, some architectural patterns and structures. Let's means more, and then a little of coding. I'll show code. So basically, application architecture describes the patterns and techniques used to design and build an application. So I like to think of it as the skeletal structure of an application. Just like we have the skeleton in our bodies, we have different organs placed in different positions of our bodies, which make it easier, or that makes us living. That is how architecture is the structures. So when it comes to applications, it defines how you structure the application, from the views to the logic to whatever services that are going on. It helps to make your app quite clean and readable. And then especially when you're working with the team, it really helps you guys work together, and then without having issues while working. So that's basically app architecture, just the structure of the app. Sometimes it could be in the structure of your folders and everything. So that's basically app architecture. And actually, it depends mostly, especially with Flutter, depends on the state management approach you're using. I know you guys had a talk last year on state management. So app architecture depends on the state management approach you're using. If it's block, so there are so many architectural patterns, especially coming from Android, where we have the MVC model view, and then the controllers. We have the model view models, the block pattern now in Flutter, and then there's Redux coming from React Native. There's MVP, and then many other patterns. There's tons of patterns that are available while for architecture, to architect your app. So these patterns help you structure your applications from small to large. But sometimes you might need to do some modifications. It's not like you just have to do it exactly how this pattern specified them. Sometimes you have to make some modifications to them. Now, how do you choose a structure that's to your app? You have to choose what what you want to build. Is it large? Is it complex? Then you go for a complex structure, or is it if it's something very simple, you wouldn't need to overkill the project. You wouldn't need to go and then use a pattern that is quite cumbersome, because sometimes when the pattern is quite cumbersome, it might overkill the project, and then sometimes you might get confusing. Like it happens to me I tried using the domain-driven design system of architecting apps, and then I discovered that there were too many folders, and it was actually, I don't know for any other person, but for me, it's too many folders I had, because I had to do the data, the domain layer, I had to do other layers, and then the folders were too many. So I had to modify it to suit my own kind of way for the project I was supposed to use it on, because it's a large project. So it all depends on the project you're doing. Is it large? Is it cumbersome? Is it something that you would be using, that you're working on with a large team? So these patterns, and then what state management approach will you be using? So if I could go into, I just did something little to show. So I have two folders here, one with architecture and then one without architecture. First of all, without architecture, even though I even did this without, I was trying to find a way to not do this without architecture, but I couldn't. So most of them are, this is with architecture. Sorry, without architecture, you just put all your screens, and then Flutter is, everything is with our widget. So you have a lot of things. Sorry, these errors are just showing up because I wasn't done with this aspect. Everything in Flutter is a widget, so you just see widgets everywhere, and then they can get very long. So one good thing is to break down your widget trees into smaller widgets. But like I said, without architecture, you'll just be having a lot of long widget trees. If you're kind enough, you can even create a new folder for your providers or your block or whatever pattern, and then you can have a folder for your models. But with architecture, this is my pattern. I like to use this. It's not, I can't say it's a standard way of doing things, but I like to divide my folders into, or my structure. I like to structure my app into the UI, separate the UI from the logic, and then the data, and then services. So I have 4 layers essentially. I have the UI layer, which has all the views. So in the UI layer, I like to keep a folder for my screens, another for widgets. Widgets are smaller components that could be shared amongst other screens. So I have a folder for that. I like to structure my code that way. And then we have services. Now, services are things that interact with APIs that are not in your app. For example, the web service that interacts with the internet, or some other APIs that interact with your device. Those are services. So for example, I have a connectivity service here that checks connectivity. I have an authentication service that handles authentication, like login and log out. So these are put in my services. I have my web service here. I'll go into details later. And then I have a folder called logic, where the application logic is stored, or I keep my application logic, and that handles the logic for all the views. I have one for the app. I have one for the favorites. Essentially, this is like a restaurant finder app that uses the Zomato client API. Zomato client API. This is the API. Sorry. Sorry. I think I clicked the wrong thing. This is the Zomato API client I used. I just had to work up something. So all the logic for the app getting that handles the views, showing data on the views and everything is stored in my logic folder. And then I have a data layer. Data layer handles data retrieval and data processing and all that. So in my data folder or data layer, I have data sources, which could either be local or remote. Local data, that is when the data is coming from local storage, such as your shared preferences or your SQLite or any database, any local database on the device. You implement them here, or it could be coming from the web. So we have a remote data source, and then we also have models. These are data models. It could be form of enums and your network requests and responses, the data models for them. And then it could be also objects where you are. For example, we have a location object. It could be serializable or not, using JSON serialization or build value. I have restaurant objects. So these are these are models of the data you want to present into your app. And then we have repositories. Now the difference between the repositories and the data sources is that the repositories interact with the data sources and gets data from the data sources. So the logic interacts with the repositories directly, while the repositories interact with the data sources. For instance, in my data source, I could decide to show the data from the internet or from the local storage based on anything. For example, based on the connectivity, if I check my connectivity, for example, I could use the connectivity to check my connectivity service to check if this data is coming from, if it's connected to the internet, get data from the remote source. If it's not connected to the internet, get the data from the local source. So that's about repositories. Also, and then, so that's basically the structure. Like I said, architecture is the app structure. So I've structured my app into these 4 different layers. I have the UI layer, I have my services that interacts with other external APIs. I have the logic that controls what the user sees, the views and everything. And then I have the data layer, which processes data and retrieves data. Now, when I do my, for example, my data sources, I like to create them as APIs of their own. So, for example, the Zomato client interacts with the web service. So let me go to the web service first of all. These are my services. My web service, I usually create an interface, which is like an API. So it's abstraction that has all the methods I can access from this web service. For example, I can perform a GET request, I can perform a POST request and all that. So these are methods I can access from the web service. And then these are the kind of data I can pass to the web service. And I now have an implementation of the web service. I don't interact directly with this, my app doesn't interact directly with this particular file or class. It doesn't interact directly with it. It's just an implementation of the web service, which now handles the real work here. So this does the calling to, I use the HTTP package, which handles the requests, and I get the requests. I pass the request through a response handler and all that. And then based on that, I return the data in its raw form. At this point, you don't need to pass the data or something. You return it in its raw form. And then with the data sources, for my data sources, I also have an interface here, an API that handles, that has all the methods I can access from this data source. So this is Zomato client. I want to fetch or be able to fetch locations based on a query. I want to be able to fetch restaurants. And then later on, I go and implement it. This is the implementation. I call my web service. I have my API keys, and based on, because I'm implementing this method, I have all the methods here, and then I can implement the real functions of this method here. So it fetches a restaurant, and still it returns the data in its raw form without being parsed. If I had a local source implemented here too, it will do the same thing. Get the data from maybe my SQLite, then pass the data, and then get it to return it in its local raw form. And then I go to my repositories. And then repositories, I have repositories for each major component. So I have to here, I want to get locations and then restaurants. So under locations, I have a repository that handles everything about locations. So I also create an interface. For now, my locations repository has just one function, just to search for locations. And then I can search for location, and then I implement the interface. This handles the searching. I want to get the data. Okay, I use dependency injection. I forgot to mention that, to get this services or data sources. So I use the get it package to handle dependency injection. What it does is creates a singleton of this particular class. Singleton meaning that only one instance of the class will be existing throughout the life cycle of the app. Whenever it runs till it stops or something. So I create my services as singletons, actually lazy singletons, meaning that they're not active until the first time they are being accessed on the app. So I use dependency injection to create these classes, and then I can use them wherever I want to. So in my implementation, I can call the Zomato client, which remains the same instance wherever it is called. And then I use the method fetch locations, and I can get the data. Now, since it's in the repository stage, I can now pass the data to the form, which is usable by the logic. So this is the form. Now it needs to be usable in the form of locations, a list of locations. So I get the data, pass the data to that form, and then I can go to my logic now. And then in my locations, I have a notifier. I'm using the change notifier as my state management approach here. You can use your block. If it's your block, you have the logic would have all your blocks, and then the events and states of your block. If it's Redux, it will have your actions, your reducers, and your middleware, and then your states. So for this example, I'm just using the change notifier with provider, and then in my logic, I want to access the repository now, which has gotten the data from my data sources, and then pass the data to a usable form. And I can, in this method, search for a query, get the data, and then use it in my views. And then if I go to my UI or the screens, if I show my location screen, I can call provide, using provider, I can get the change notifier, and then I can build my results based on what is returned. So I consume the location notifier, and then with that, I can get my locations and then present it to the user. So this structure really helps. I didn't, when I wanted to, the way I wanted to present the without architecture, I wanted to, like, most times, like when I started, I used to do everything in my user interface, in my stateless widget or stateful widget. So I make my internet calls here, I do my access to database here, I do everything. So and I've seen most Flutter developers doing the same thing. Yeah, they make all the internet calls right inside the view or the screen. They make the access to their database. Some even put their models in the same page and all that. So the truth is that it will actually work. Yes, it will, the app will run, the app will work, but it makes it difficult to maintain. For instance, if I have this structure here and I have any need in future to adjust the UI, maybe the company wants or my client wants to have a different color, or wants to change the user, the components or something, I can just go straight and I know that everything here in the UI is about my screens. Adjusting anything here would not affect the logic of the app. The logic will work as it ought to. Later on, I can say, okay, yes, I want to, right now I'm not implemented local storage. And then maybe sometime I want to implement local storage. I could just come and implement my local storage. Maybe I want to store to SQLite, or I want to store to shared preferences. I can implement anything here, and then it doesn't affect other parts of the app. But if I'm to do that without architecture, where everything exists in the UI, all my network calls, if it's, number one, it's difficult to trace errors when they come up, and number two, it's difficult to maintain by you or by anybody else that sees your code. It's difficult to maintain because the person might be, where is this coming from? Where is this happening? And then number three, there's a lot of repetition, a lot of boilerplate code because you'll be repeating the same thing over and over. So for example, if I had to make the network call from, if I go to my services and I had to, in my web service implementation, maybe I want to make a GET request and I had to implement this particular thing in all of my views that I have to make requests, network requests. I'll be repeating a whole lot, but I've just done this implementation in one file and I can reuse it wherever. So these are the benefits of having a good architecture. Your code becomes reusable, becomes clean, becomes easily maintainable, and then you can easily find errors. You can easily look for errors, locate them, and then fix them. So these are the benefits of app architecture. And then another thing I want to talk about is not overkilling your app. For example, this is a very simple app that I could have done with something maybe simpler, but I just wanted to show, for example, if I was doing a very large app, this will be something like it. So it actually depends on your needs. You want to make something large, you want to make something small. It depends on your needs at the moment. So app architecture structures your app in a good way, makes your code clean, makes your code readable, makes it understandable, and then you should always learn to comment on methods, on functions as you write them out. Before you write a method, try to comment out the function or what it will be doing in readable form, so that whenever somebody picks up your code to work on it, the person understands what you're trying to do and can continue from where you stopped or make modifications. And then also naming conventions, where let the naming of the function be very, very close to what it's performing. So if you're saying signing, the method should have the signing in it or something close to that. Another good thing about good app architecture, it helps in making your code testable. You can easily test your methods, functions, and classes. And then even your widgets, you can test them. But if everything is in one file, it might be difficult for you to test the functions or your methods because they need to be pure functions to be testable. So I think that's it from me about app architecture. I don't know if anybody has questions. Um,
Thank you, Lazarus, for the presentation. There's one question from the chat from Tristan. He's asking what are the advantages of using interfaces?
okay, like I said, one of the advantages is it's abstraction. So it provides you with methods that perform functions without actually knowing what is going on. For example, we write Flutter code, we call methods, sorry, example, we call widgets, we have stateless widgets extending, for example, I create favorite screen extending stateless widgets. You understand? I don't know what's going on behind the stateless widget. There are a lot of render boxes and all that. So it kind of makes your code cleaner because you can actually separate, for example, you can actually separate the implementation from the interface where the actual work is done from the interface where you have all the methods that you want to actually work on or work with. I think that's how I understand it to be. It's just an abstraction from the main work or the large chunk of data or work that's been done, then just giving you methods that you can access wherever you want to, instead of writing out the functions itself or the function.
Yeah, there's also another insight from Little Ones. She's saying mostly inheritance and multiple inheritance and abstraction.
Yeah.
So any other question? Tristan, is the one you wrote on the chat a question or a statement? Maybe you can ask it out.
Tristan, not much more to say because I'm there's a lot of things I forgot from Flutter. That architecture, is it suitable for a lot of state management? It seems to me that you have created some logic components with view model as maybe as using view model something as an interface, right?
This approach is compatible with any stage management. For example, if I were to be using block, I will put my blocks in this folder here where I have my logic. So all I'll be having is I'll even change the logic, the name logic to block or blocks. So if I were using Redux, this would be my Redux folder that would have all the state management files in it. You understand? So it's like, yeah, it looks like the view model approach, but it's quite different. It's just different. I don't think it's different in any way, but it's just my way of doing it. If I had blocks, it would be blocks. This folder will be for blocks, and then if I was using Redux, it will be this folder will be for my Redux. But now I'm using provider, and then I put my change notified files inside this logic I just call it logic because this handles all the logic components of the app.
Okay, it's clear.
Lazarus, I have one question. So about in your slides you mentioned about types of state management. So yeah, architecture. Architecture. So is there like one particular one which is mostly preferred, or at what point should one use which one?
like I said, it all depends on your proficiency, what you're used to. Most guys coming from the Android development are used to MVC. Um, so if you're used to that and you can work with that, it's fine. It also depends on the complexity of the project. Um, if your project is very large, you might need to use another pattern. And then also depends on the state management approach you want to use. Maybe you want to use Redux, you want to use block, then you have to follow the block pattern. And so I think but I won't say anyone is greater than the other. It's just a structure. So it depends on depends on your use case and then the project you're working on, so that you don't overkill the project. I didn't add the domain-driven design. There's a Flutter DDD architecture. I think there's a template on GitHub about this, but for me, I found it very cumbersome because of the many levels of abstraction. But it all depends on the use case and the project you're working on.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I have another question as a follow-up.
Okay.
But if at first I have a very small app and
Yeah.
it doesn't need a big, state management system like Redux. I start small, and over time it grow and it has more complexities. What state management system is suitable as well for small to medium or maybe larger? Because if I need to change my state management in between, it becomes a problem. So the choice of the state management system is also important from the start, right?
Yeah. Okay. When working in such apps, first of all, you need to understand or know the potential for that app to grow before from the very start. So um, Redux is good for very large apps, where especially for apps that because it came from React Native, which is web. It's good for single page applications. It has to do with web and all that. So it's good for very large apps and it's complex and then has a lot of boilerplate code to be written. Block is suitable for also very large apps. Block is suitable from small to very large apps. Provider is suitable for very small apps and medium size and large. It all depends on your proficiency, what you want, how good you are with manipulating these things. But like I said, if you have a good app architecture, um, changing logic or changing your state management option might not be too difficult if you structure your app in a good way. Yes, it will involve you changing a whole lot of things, especially in your UI layer and then the logic layer. But your logic the pattern of your logic will remain the same. For example, in my logic where I have my change notifiers, if I were to change this to block, I know I have to just extend the block and then start turning everything to strings, and I have to create an event. I have to create the states that are coming, the events that are coming, and the states that are coming out. So, but I'll advise that whatever you think through before you start building the app. Does this app have the potential to grow very large? If it does, then you should be looking at using things like Block or Redux, or even Provider or Mobex, or Get It, the GetX package or something. Whichever one of them, especially as far as you're able to handle or you understand what it means by state management.
I'm used to Redux, so it's no problem for me to write a lot of code.
Yeah. The thing with Redux is a lot of code to be written for, especially for example, if I were to write this particular app now in Redux, it will take a lot of. I have to write a middleware. I have to write actions. I have to write users, but if you're used to it, that's fine. I'm not used to it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan. M. Sanad is asking any good advice you can give to a beginner, someone
Okay.
just getting started with Flutter.
My advice is to um, focus on understanding application development rather than most times I see, yes, it's good to learn, take a course and learn the basics of Flutter, that is the widgets, everything being widgets, and then UI components. It's good to learn them at the beginning, but so many people focus on UI. Most of the videos we have on YouTube are how to implement this UI, how to implement that UI. And then at first I started like that. I was interested in UI. But it came to a point that it was now difficult. When I had implemented the UI, it was difficult making it work as a whole, as an app entirely. So I think that should be the major part of app development is the logic, the business logic of the app, and then data manipulation. So I think these are the most complex or most important parts of app development: the business logic and data manipulation. And I think those should be the core focus of a beginner, especially when you don't have any prior experience of app development. Yes, learn the widgets. It's beautiful when you've done something and you can see um, beautiful designs, and the UI guys are always giving us complex designs and all that. But I think a beginner should also learn the UI and then also learn good logic or application logic.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, because also most of the time when people get started with Flutter, they forget about that, learning that, and learning about the effective methods of that. So as much as you are trying to learn Flutter, also try to learn that so that you don't get left out, especially when you start developing complex apps that require development of business logic. Yeah, any other insight? I see Kendi said that for the state management, you can check what's uh what's uh what's useful for you and your team. Maybe Kendi, you can highlight it briefly.
Yeah.
Oh, Kendi said she has mic issues. She's not able to talk but can only type. Yeah, but that's a great insight. So any other person with any other question or addition or any other thing? Yeah, so I think maybe there are no other further questions. But all I can say is thank you for the great presentation. You had great insights for anyone who is getting started or anyone who is already doing Flutter and doing active development. So I think maybe these insights will help us improve on whatever we are currently doing to build better code. Yeah. So thank you. Back to you, Lazarus. Anything that you would like to say, parting shot?
Um, Basically, I'm still learning. I'm still developing myself. So I don't I'm not a professional in app development, but my little experience, a lot of people, um, you should make Google your friend as a developer. You should make Stack Overflow your friend as a developer, because these are essential sources of solution to a lot of issues that you might have. If you develop this habit of finding solutions by yourself, not just depending on maybe asking somebody or that. Yes, you could meet somebody for questions to help you, but learn the habit of solving problems yourself. The most interesting thing about um, software engineering or development, app development, or software development as a whole is problem solving, your ability to solve problems. And then if you go for interviews with a company or a firm, they give you a problem and they expect you to be able to solve it. And that problem you might not have seen before, but your ability to solve that problem is what is most important. So in app development, continue practicing. Don't leave it for a while. Continue practicing. Gradually, you would get more conversant. You should also form the habit of studying the Flutter documentation. Sometimes I go through already implemented widgets in the Flutter. For example, there's the list style, the other widgets. I go through how they implemented it. I don't go very deep, maybe to the rendering and everything, but at least I go to how they implemented these widgets. And then through that, you continue learning how to implement complex widgets in the best way and in the best form to get the best performance. Somebody is asking, what do you, Lazarus, need to learn in Flutter to be better? What's the most difficult for you in Flutter? For me, I think the most difficult in Flutter would be where you have to maybe implement some platform implementations. For example, you want to access platform APIs, for example, on Android or on iOS or on Windows or that's for me, that's one of the most difficult things in Flutter. The other things I can find my way around through documentations, like for example, animations are quite complex. Usually we have very complex animations. Although Flutter has made most of the things very easy. And then also some logic issues. I find myself running into issues with logic every now and then. I'm actually currently working on a project for a client that I'm building a Windows application with Flutter. So I'm pushing myself to the limit because some things are not ready yet. But I'm trying to just try my best to work it out. It's actually an application that has a point of sale and has to be running on Windows, has to print and has to maybe scan and all that. So these are some things I'm pushing through with. But I like I said, it all takes time. Don't assume that overnight you'll be as good as the guys that wrote the Flutter codes and all that. It just takes time. I'm still trying to develop myself. I'm not where I need to be, but I'm trying to develop myself. I bet you some of you guys are even better than I am. I'm just sharing my experience here. So it actually helps to continue practicing. I think that's one of the basic things and then also study. You can study people's codes on GitHub. You can study people's code. I have some code on my GitHub repository that are public, where I started working on implementing the Flutter for desktop apps or something. I have some and when I'm done with the app I'm working with, I would also put it out maybe on Medium or something. How I implemented, I was able to also take some time, go through pub.dev, always search for things. Sometimes I go to pub.dev, just going through packages that are there, seeing what people are doing. A lot of guys are doing great things. making things easier for us. You understand? So you don't need to write most of the things. They're already there. And then also I like to avoid too many packages because they could cause some issues too. Avoid using so many packages. Some people, I've seen some guys, they just, for something simple they can implement themselves, they go and use a package for that. So I don't think you should do that. If it's something you can easily implement and it's not time consuming or it's not difficult, there's no need for getting a package on that. So use packages that are very essential and not just every package, but very essential packages that have good ratings on PubDev, and then this will make your work easier and faster. Basically, so my advice to anybody starting, anybody already there, those above me, I don't know, I can't be advising those above me anyway. Um, but we should, Flutter is a great is a great um, platform. It's a great platform and it promises great things. A lot of guys are already doing crazy things. A lot of guys are also already doing wonderful things with Flutter. So I just want to encourage everybody to be part of it in whatever way you can. Um, Also try to be part of the community um, on their platforms on Reddit, on uh, any of the platforms, and then always get info from watch videos on YouTube, read books, just to help yourself and then become better. I'm happy somebody here is very good with Redux. I'm not good with Redux. I'm not good with Redux because it's I for the app I was supposed to the app I'm building on the desktop I was supposed to use Redux, but um, it was quite cumbersome for me. So I decided to use what's best for me. And so that's my advice to you: use what works for you. It might not be the best, but as far as it works for you, I think you should work with that. And then I hope someday we get to meet again and talk more.
Yeah, thank you, Lazarus, for all that. So I think anyone who is in the call and who is just getting started or who is continuing with Flutter got some good insights from his talk, and I hope we'll learn from each other. So if you have other questions, is there maybe where they can reach you, Lazarus?
Yeah, my WhatsApp number is I'm going to put it on the chat. My WhatsApp
Okay.
number is that I'm going to put or you can get me via my email. Or
Yeah,
I think
you
those are
can
the
share
basic.
either your email or your Twitter handle within the chat so that anyone
Okay.
who is interested for further questions can reach you out. So to everyone who joined, we are very much grateful for this. This was our first meetup of the year. So thank you all and hoping to meet you in the next one, which will be in February. So me who is speaking, I'm Maureen Josephine, a software engineer and also a Flutter organizer for Flutter Kisumu. So thank you all and feel welcomed in the next meetup. Thank you, Lazarus.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so Lazarus just shared his contact. So briefly, maybe you can check it out. I'll also share it in the email for those who didn't get it. Otherwise, thank you all for joining. Have a great evening and a great afternoon for those in France and those in Nigeria. Or what's the time?
It's afternoon here.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.